If you've noticed your relationships becoming strained as you pursue your fitness goals, or your partner seems distant or resentful about your dedication to training and nutrition, or even if you're struggling to balance your physical pursuits with your emotional connections, this episode is for you. Today, we're discussing the often ignored impact that pursuing fitness can have on our closest relationships, and how to prevent your path to a better body from leading to a broken connection. Whether you're meal prepping while your partner orders takeout or spending Saturday mornings at the gym instead of enjoying time together, what we're about to share will help you achieve your fitness goals while strengthening, not sacrificing, your relationships. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the podcast that blends evidence and engineering to help you build smart, efficient systems to achieve your dream physique. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today we are exploring that delicate balance between fitness goals and relationship health with EJ and Tara Kerwin. Now, EJ is a licensed professional counselor, and Tara is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and as co-founders of the Relationship Renovation Counseling Center and hosts of the very popular Relationship Renovation podcast, go make sure to follow that. They have helped many couples work through the challenges of pursuing individual goals while maintaining strong emotional connections. Today, you'll learn how to maintain that emotional intimacy while pursuing your physique goals, how to turn potential sources of conflict into opportunities to connect, and specific tools for building a stronger relationship through your fitness journey. EJ, Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Philip. We are excited to have this conversation.
And I'm going to say this is a first, guys, because we were talking before we recorded that we talk about the nuts and bolts of fitness all the time, but never quite get into relationships, much more than surface level. So we brought you on. I wanted to have you on to get into that because I see something all the time with my nutrition clients, and I hear it from listeners that, for example, one partner is tracking their macros, they're meal prepping, they're using a food scale, they're training, they're changing all their habits, right? And the other is at some level not that. They're not fully on board or they're far from that behavior and there's a huge disconnect. I guess I want to start with that dynamic, the relationship dynamic in that situation so that people listening can say, okay, I kind of fall into that bucket, and then we can talk about what couples can do about it. If you could just share with us your experience with that dynamic.
Well, I mean, on the personal level, we've just seen it over, we've been together over a decade, and both of us have had times where we've trained for marathons, embarked on like personal journeys around whether it be weight loss or toning or whatever, and how much more effective it is when we're both sort of in it together. It just makes it a hell of a lot easier. Like you said, if you're eating the same way and so you're meal prepping together, it makes it easier. And then we've also had times where, there's an injury or there's just a lack of motivation from one of us, and that can not just like make it harder to achieve your goals, but also create like disruption in just how we're getting along.
Well, and what the first thing I think is when EJ and I first started dating, I was a big runner and he's like, Tara, I hate running. So don't ever expect me to be a runner. And I was like, oh, I would never do that. Like, right. But this relationship, just like we're trying to get in shape with our body and that's its own system, the relationship is a system. And if you don't have skillful ways of making that collaborative, then people will be in it alone. And then that's what we see when couples come in and they're alone in their wellness journey. Maybe one's got more motivation than the other, but they're not talking about it. They're not sharing their experiences. They're not in this place of acceptance around, maybe I am more motivated to eat healthier this year, but this person isn't. But how can we create systems that feel cooperative, collaborative, so that we can still both support each other and not judge each other to make it feel like we're in it alone? And again, the couples we see, they're in it alone. Maybe one person's really healthy and fit. The other person's not so motivated for whatever transition, timing, whatever it may be, for a myriad of reasons. And they like are fighting against it. Like, how dare you want me to change? And why don't you want to be healthier? And you're just like, you guys, how do we get in this together so both of you can get your needs met, even though they're differently? Like this can happen. I know that's like a long answer to your.
No, it's beautiful. There's so many gems in there. One thing you said was skillful ways of making it collaborative. and making systems. And just because you have maybe slightly different goals or you're different times in your life, and this evolves through a relationship. I know for a fact, I've been married to almost 20 years, and I can tell you that we both have changed quite a bit since then. And it's cool. We both have different goals at any one point. And the telling someone right off the bat, this is what I like, this is what I don't, right? Honest communication, just so that you can get on the same page. Because who knows, maybe it is a deal breaker for like getting married that, hey, you don't like to run, forget it. You don't like to climb mountains, I don't know. But but it sounds like communication is obviously going to be an important part of this, and also supporting each other regardless. And that's really, there's going to be a lot of personal stuff for me that comes out of this conversation, which I'm sure you get that a lot, where I think about, I'm huge into lifting. My wife, she strength trains, but she's more into cardio type stuff. And we've realized that what we want to do is just support each other, whatever that means for that.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you then tend to get a little more openness on both sides to what the other is doing, and curiosity, I guess I would say.
Absolutely.
So then what happens when this goes to that level of a wide chasm, right? When one partner gets very serious. You mentioned before we recorded bodybuilding competitor, and we talk about this show of physique development where it gets really, when you get super serious about it, it's an extreme and a lot of things fall to a lower priority. Can you do that sustainably while still being in a relationship? And how does that happen? How does that work?
Well, I mean, I think a number of things falls into this category, and certainly fitness and then like training for serious fitness goals, definitely. And the negative dynamic that often happens is we are adaptive creatures, but we oftentimes adapt unintentionally, right? And so like in this case that we were talking about earlier, there was one member of the couple who who did competition, where the physique competitions. And so they would go through like a 2-month cutting period, I think it was. And what they said was like, basically what happens is during that cutting period, the one partner just became a bear, and was just like, because they were at a calorie deficit, and so their mood was deteriorated. They bordered on depression, because when you're not feeding yourself, you can get depressed, you can get anxious. And the way they unconsciously adapted was they would just basically avoid each other for 2 months.
But the one thing that would happen is she would be alone in it every day because of the guilt she would have for like being a bear, but just would not talk about it. So he just learned, like, just
stay away
we will
from her.
not have a relationship for 2 months. We'll live together. I'll help her do the meal prep. But other than that, but she was still alone in her suffering, and he felt super alone. Like he wanted to support her and be like, hey, I got you. But she had all this shame around being such a bear that she would push him away.
Yeah. And so our goal with couples oftentimes is like looking at what are the ways that you've adapted without intentionality. Okay, what didn't work about that? All right, let's create a new system, right? Like, okay, you want to support your partner, you go through mood changes. Well, let's make really intentional decisions around that. And that's a big thing that we help couples overcome in multiple ways, is just getting like intentional and making decisions that make sense and that keep you emotionally connected. Because what we find happens is, first, like that couple, they become emotionally distant from one another because they're not checking in. But then eventually what it leads to is physical disconnection. Is like they stop having sex because, your partner might look fantastic, but if your every interaction you have with them is either negative or you're just not talking to them, what are the chances your sex life is going to stay positive?
Yeah, you talked about being adaptive creatures and not doing it with intentionality, and that's appeals to me here is, again, the theme that you don't have to abandon these pursuits. It's just, what are you doing to make them intentional? And I suppose that that would then open up conversation to other trade-offs or compromises that both sides need to make. So for example, if that person you were talking about, the competitor, it's the woman in the relationship, right? She was the competitor.
Yes. Yep.
And she's like, look, I have to weigh all my food on a food scale every time I eat. How does that affect when they get together to eat, or do they eat separately? Like, I'm curious about the details of how that looked and how they dealt with that. You said they were having issues, but did they resolve those issues? And then what did that look like?
So I'm going to bleed this into another couple that I actually directly work with around this. And what would happen is, he is meat, potatoes kind of dude, like loves his cheese on his potatoes. She went through this 6-month hardcore training and food, like counting her macros, all of that. And so at first, right, they came in because he was like, I'm not eating that crap that you prepared, right? So anyway, they started having all of this conflict. And I was like, okay, hold on a second. Let's just get down to what are each of your needs. His need was because she was the cooker. She cooked every meal
Hmm.
for him. He worked a 9 to 5 job. She got off earlier, so she would cook the meals. So what we did is we started to come up with agreements. What was he willing to do? What was she willing to do? What was he willing to eat that was clean? What was she willing to eat maybe one day a week that wasn't so clean because she got to have like a little cheat day, if that's what this one coach called it. And so we literally sat for a 3-hour session and came up with a system every single day for this couple so that both of them would feel they were winning. So they would do a bunch of the meal prep on Sunday for both of them together. And that way they're still eating together, but they might be eating different meals. But now, even though he wasn't in it with her, she felt like, oh my gosh, he's still willing to meal prep with me on Sunday because I can't do all of this, like 2 separate meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner by myself. And they like literally, it was like 1 or 2 sessions. And had they not come in, I can tell you, because we've seen this too. They're in a place of resignation. This will never change. This person isn't for me. I don't want to do this anymore. And it was like, I helped them be in this place of acceptance. Like, look, your wife is going through this program. She's really motivated. I know it's changing your lifestyle completely. It's not forever. What are you willing to do to be in this place of acceptance instead of powerlessness? And when you kind of use that language from like disempowered to empowered, people are like, oh, it's like you don't even think about it. It's like the situation is the same, but you could either resign to it and become a victim of it, or you could be like, how can I accept that this is our situation right now? And how can we work together to the best of our ability to come up with agreements that feel good for both of us?
Yeah, I like the idea of the agreements because those difficult conversations, it's just what they are. I mean, again,
Yes,
speaking from
yes,
personal experience,
totally.
and my wife is great at initiating those, and I've learned to initiate them because,
Yes.
guys and women often don't approach that in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's like you get the pit of your stomach, you're dreading it all day if you want to have this conversation, especially if you don't have the support or maybe therapist to kind of make you do it, if you will, for lack of a better term. But then it's like many things that you dread, it's kind of, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like overblown. Once you get through it, you realize that actually wasn't as big a deal, but it's going to make a massive improvement because we labeled these specific things. Like you said, I agree on exactly what we want to eat, and we'll know that about each
Yeah.
other. And then we're
Yeah.
going to do the things
Yeah.
together, even if we don't eat the same thing. Right.
And every single day checking in with each other. Like
Checking in.
Dr. Stan Tatkin, he's this great researcher in the field of relationships. And he has the triple P's: plan, predict, prepare. We can't predict everything, but we can predict a lot of things on a daily basis. And if we can plan, predict, prepare for our day every day as a couple, whether that's around lifestyle, meal planning, workouts, we're going to get successfully through it. But most people don't take those 10 minutes to do that. And then all of these, right? Unconscious expectations, disappointments, self judgments, insecurities, you name it,
Well, and
hijack us.
it metastasizes, right? Because
Yeah.
it starts off as just like, okay, we can't talk about nutrition. If every time we talk about nutrition, it ends up in a
Leads
fight.
to a fight. Yep.
You avoid it, and then you just start feeling more emotionally disconnected, or you lose confidence that you can face conflict and come out with a resolution that feels good for both people. And so there's that initial emotional disconnect. We just won't deal with it, and it just starts to spread because it's like,
Mhm.
well, if we can't talk about this, and we probably can't talk about parenting, and if we can't talk about parenting, we probably can't talk about money. And then all of a sudden you're avoiding and especially like you said, men will just be like, well, I'm not going to bring up anything difficult. I'm just going to I'm going to hide in my cave. I'm going to go do my thing and
Don't
she'll do
ruffle the
her
feather.
thing. And our goal is like, we bring people back and we say, hey, you have different needs. Let's negotiate it.
Yeah.
Let's honor each other. Let's find some
Mm.
healthy communication habits, and let's figure out that you actually can solve these problems
And
together.
that you're not uniquely broken and that you
Mm.
can get through it. It's just skills that we don't learn how to, skillfully navigate through difficult emotions. We learn how to defend ourselves from them. So when they hear that you're not uniquely broken, we all have to learn these skills. Like it's not innate in us. it softens it a little.
Yeah. And that makes me think that any two people on the planet, when you put them together, you're going to have like a Venn diagram, two circles that overlap a little bit,
Yeah.
but there's a lot that doesn't overlap. And I think
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
recognize that about even our closest spouse or partner, whoever that's the case, something you said, AJ, about the men in the conversations. I was watching Ghosts recently. You guys know that show? I
Oh,
think it's on
yeah.
like Paramount. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And the husband was watching a game and his wife came up and asked a question and he pauses it and he goes, okay, this is the best part of the game, but I think this is the time when I need to pause and listen to what you have to say. Like it was that exact dynamic of, we're watching the game. Like, come on, what do we buy? But this is important.
You are the most important thing to me. I really
Yeah.
want to hear what you have to say.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that also speaks to this idea of like men are pretty trainable. Like I've found like in couples counseling that when you're able to break down, I work with a lot of like male engineers over the years who
Mhm.
come in and their wives are like telling them like, I need you to be more emotionally present. And they come to me and they're like, what is she talking about? I have no idea what that is. And you just break it down of like, well, you want to have this in your relationship, which oftentimes is physical intimacy, right? Well, she needs emotional intimacy. And here are things you can do that are pretty practical. When she walks in the house, you put down whatever you're doing, you walk up to her, you give her a hug and a kiss. It's like, and men will be like, okay, yeah, that's reasonable. That makes sense. But when it's veiled under things like emotional connection or vulnerability, that isn't practical enough. That's not like if I do A and B, then I get C.
Yeah, and the idea of the systems and the check-ins, I think, hits on that in a way where you're making it this objective thing. If I know I want to build muscle, I've got to train 3 days a week. If I know I want to have more vulnerability and emotional connection, I have to do X, Y, Z. Like I get that, and that's a way to appeal to some gender-specific differences that folks might have. And I'm sure in your practice, everyone's different in their own
Totally.
way, but you just have to find
Right.
what that is, right? Okay, so I'm curious about. We talked a little bit about the food differences. The other thing is the training, like, and schedules and stuff like that, going to the gym. People always ask about that. Well, especially women who have kids, then they have to take care of the kids. They're the provider, have to get kids ready for school. Like the list goes on. One parent works from home, and they want to go to the gym. Like that's a massive source of fighting that I've come
Yeah.
across, right?
It,
It's like,
it's
yeah,
huge.
go.
It's
So
huge.
yeah,
And
go ahead. Yeah.
well, I was going to say women biologically, just like the nurturing piece, like they're more biologically equipped to put all these other needs in front of their own.
Mm.
And again, this is gender specific, but men, like, they're really good at taking care of their own needs. Right. And so there's this very like unconscious thing that can happen where it's like, oh, like for me, when I'm putting away laundry, like my laundry is always the last to put away. And I'm like, why is that? Because like everybody else comes first. We have 4 kids and my husband, and I didn't even think about it. But guess what I do now? I put away my laundry first. But it's that idea around like, what if like that's happening in the relationship? I'm going to start to build resentment, but I didn't intentionally mean to do it. So it's that whole idea of checking in every single day. EJ and I wake up at 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, when can I have my gym time? When can you have your gym time? We make it happen so that both of our needs for fitness are met because we're agreeing that both of us, it's a very important thing every day for our mental health, for our physical health to have our gym time. And today we're going to the gym at 4 o'clock. So we had to hire a sitter to come watch over our kids so we could do that together because we didn't have time in the morning to separate and do it. So it's just about recognizing that needs are equally important and that you have to be able to have those conversations to say, what are you needing? What am I needing? And how can we make this happen realistically? Right. And timing and everything. That's where that plan, predict, prepare comes in.
Well, and I think we try to use like plural pronouns when it comes to these type of things. Like instead of what you and
Yeah.
we try to look at it as a we, and that we know when we are both taking care of ourselves, we know our brain chemistry is better. We know we feel better about ourselves. We know our attraction level is better. And so it's about like, this is a shared goal instead of getting, which again, some of this is like a little evolutionary biology stuff where we're very like self-centered, like what I,
Mhm.
and we try to make it about like, this is a shared goal we have together. Now it might be separate. There might be a period of
Mhm.
time where I'm more in the running phase and she's, more in the F45 phase or whatever, and that we have to just like adjust it. But they're shared goals we have together.
But and I do think the first piece of it is like recognizing that individual needs are both equally important for the sake of the coupleship
Mm,
and being okay to be okay with that. Cause I remember even as a new
mm.
mom, like, oh, my needs aren't important. Like I'm raising humans that have to stay alive. Like it actually got us in a really difficult place, which is why we created our couples counseling center in the first place. Cause I didn't think I had any right to have needs. I mean, my everything went out the window. And I lost my identity with my running and my fitness. And it felt really bad, but I just felt like, oh, this is just what we do. And we know now that no, like you create systems that will make sure that needs are getting met on both sides because that's going to feel really good for both
Mm.
people and not lose your sense of individuality within that coupleship.
Yeah, I could see how the nurturing nature of women, and again, these are just general statements I know we're making, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of truth to them. Both really attracts me to the opposite sex in terms of that empathy that they have, and I've learned a lot from it being around my wife, seeing that. At the same time, I
Yeah.
could see how it would burn you out because you're
Absolutely.
putting so many things first. How can a spouse, husband, partner help a woman who does that to herself? How can he help her maybe prioritize herself, if that makes sense?
I mean,
I love that
yeah,
question.
for me, like I had to like recognize how much easier it is for me to take care of myself. That was like
Mm.
sort of the first step. Was like it took me a long time to realize like, oh, like some of that resentment she has is like sort of well based. And that the reality is that like, yeah, like I just wake up because I happen to be a morning person. I just wake up and I go off to the gym and I'm gone from like 5 to 7, and then I swoop in and pick up the kids and take them to school. But like then Tara's left with like the rest of the day where she's trying to figure out how in the world, and clearly it's not working because she's not getting there. So the first thing I had to do was just realize like, that like, okay, like I am kind of just taking care of myself and not making room for Tara, right? And then the next thing was like, okay, I'm gonna have to adjust. Like, yeah, I would love to go to the gym every morning at 6, and that works for me, but it's not working for
Mhm.
Tara. She wants me to be around, even if she's
Mm.
isn't able to say it. She needs the support in the morning. So then it's like, okay, like how does this become not just me take caring of myself, but how does it become us creating a system? And for us, it was like, well, we wake up in the morning and we make a plan, because our life is sort of it's different from
Yeah.
day to day.
It's a little
One kid
chaotic.
has
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was wondering. I was wondering
one
about
kid has
that.
basketball on
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Tuesdays, but
yeah.
then there's gymnastics on
Well,
Wednesdays.
and I was going to say too, really quick, not to interrupt, but we were just on this new moms podcast and she asked a very similar question. And like moms need to be taken care of too. And so partners hear that because I'm trying to be a super mom, right? We had twins that had colic and I'm like nursing and not sleeping or not eat. I don't, but I looked like I got this. I know I
Mm,
haven't slept for 5 days, but I've got this. So EJ just feels like, oh, she's got this. She's like superwoman. That's not actually happening. I did not know how to say I need help or support because if I say that, that means there's something wrong with me. So when EJ was like, baby, your needs are so important, like you are a priority, like him saying that to me helped normalize and validate that I don't have to be in it alone. So I feel like,
mhm.
yes, EJ doing his individual work, but him letting me know it's okay, girl. You need to get your ass to the gym. Like this is really important. I was like, okay, thank you for recognizing that. It's just you're seen and you're being taken care of while you're also taking care of others.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Going back to plan, predict, prepare. And because I was thinking, on one hand, we would all love to have our whole week planned and our month planned. And like, we know when we're going to work out and everything, but life doesn't work that way for everything, for food, for everything. And so I was going to say, EJ, just get up at 3 a.m. and go to the gym then. Right. But
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
then you get
Perfect.
no sleep and then you're
Yeah.
grumpy and who knows
And
what
my
else. Right.
cortisol levels go up and I end up with a hump on my
Uh,
back, and who
Here
needs
you
that?
go. Here you go. So something came up regarding training. It comes up a lot in my world where we lift and one partner might ask for help from the other partner, like some coaching. And there's kind of a running joke, like never coach your wife. That's the joke. Cause and I've been through this personally where my wife has asked for help, but I'm like, I wait till she asks because I don't want to, I don't want to coach her, so to speak. That's not our roles. Some people do it successfully and others find that it makes things worse. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
I'm
I mean,
interesting to hear what you say then.
well, I think especially in our relationship, I think you used the Venn diagram example a while ago, like that our roles and the aspects of our relationship have a way of polluting other ones, right? And so like
Yeah.
if you become your partner's coach, there's certain ways in which a coach treats the person they coach, and there's certain ways in which uh, a husband is a husband to his wife, and then there's certain way business owners, and that's something that we realize is like our business ownership roles. We're messing with our husband wife roles, and so I think that that's the problem about having that dual relationship is maybe some of the dynamics within your relationship, maybe around control, maybe around poor communication. If you're not careful, it
Yeah.
comes into that coaching and then ends up just not being a positive experience. I can think of a couple I worked with years ago who he desperately wanted to coach his wife in on the physical side, in weightlifting, and she just had no interest in it. And a lot of it was the unresolved dynamics that they had in their husband and wife relationship. And then he, it really hurt him because it was such an important thing. It was such an important part of his life. And he really just wanted to share it, but it just wasn't going to happen, and so.
Well, because then there's that feeling of like I'm being judged or if I don't get it this right way. So, I mean, I would say it's possible if you have very clear boundaries. Here's what's okay. Here's what's not okay. It's okay for you to tell me to go up this amount of weight. It's not okay for you to say, like, I can't believe you didn't just get that last rep in. I mean, I don't exactly know, but like having very clear boundaries around that role. I know EJ and I do that in our professional life. Like, here's what's okay. Here's what's not okay. So if you can have those, again, agreements, boundaries within that coaching dynamic, but you also say, how do we make sure that this doesn't spill over in, our parenting roles, or because they're uniquely defined. So I feel like if a couple has good communication skills, is able to have clear boundaries, here's what's okay, here's what's not okay. I think that's like such a great gift to be able to share that together. But usually people don't have that. And so it ends up being a nightmare.
Well, and then there's all the stuff around like body image and all that, right? Is like you might be the type of conversation someone you coach, you might be able to have a more difficult conversation around their body that if you have with somebody you're intimate with, that might be a heck of a lot harder. Yeah. It's just like
totally different. I can't imagine if I said to my wife, let's look at your progress photos and look at your, shoulder definition here. And no way.
Wow. You've been slipping.
Yeah.
You're going to a separate bedroom tonight, Philip.
Yeah. It's crazy. So that's a good segue then when we talk about body image. You mentioned earlier one couple who, I don't know if we were recording yet. You mentioned one couple who like almost let her health get even worse because as a backlash to her husband or partner being so obsessed with his physical development, right? Do I have that right?
Heels dug in.
Yeah, they were, and then that's within the realm of fitness, but also sometimes it can be a way a partner protects themselves from intimacy. Is like, I don't want to be attractive to them, or it's the power I have of choosing to work out, not work out, that we can definitely use, our fitness or our lack thereof as a way to agitate or to keep ourselves separate from our partner.
I was talking to a guy today who said, I'm in my 50s. I built a lot of strength. I want to lean out, but I don't want to get abs because I know that's weird in my 50s. Like it was this concept of 20 somethings versus 30 and 40 versus 50s. And then whether you're in a relationship or not, whether you're trying to chase girls in your 20s or whatever. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of maybe misaligned even understanding of what men and women find attractive. So actually the question I wanted to ask more for you, Tara, is like, do women, I mean, I know this is general, everybody's attracted to something different, but when it comes to physique, when it comes to six-pack abs, when it comes to leanness versus big, fat, and skinny and all that, like where do women stand on, caring about that, and like how important should it be, and are men like spending way too much time doing this stuff?
Oh my gosh, that's a loaded question,
I
Philip.
know, I know, I know. Yeah.
I mean, here's what's important for me. If I see EJ taking care of himself, that's important because it makes me feel like I can trust that he cares about his body, his mind, his soul for longevity. So I know that I'm not going to, right? I don't have to worry about him having a heart attack or stroke or modeling unhealthy dynamics to our children. So just knowing that he cares and he takes initiative, and yeah, we fall off sometimes, but we have this trust that we want to be healthy. We want to have a healthy mindset. We're not rigid in it. We're very flexible, but I think we both trust each other. So I don't need him to have six packs. Like, is that sexy? And yeah, but I love him for who he is because I know that he tries really hard to feel comfortable in his body the way it is. We also have a history. We're both eating disorder specialists. So we've worked with a lot of anorexia, bulimia, purging through exercise. So we know how important body acceptance is and positive body image, no matter what it looks like. So you're probably like talking to the wrong person when it comes to like how important is that physical critique. I think it's the biggest thing for me is like he's willing to stay healthy and strong because it's important to him and it's a value for him and it's also a value to me. So now it's shared.
Well, I
And
think
if it turned into six-pack abs,
what
awesome.
the hell?
No, that's the good level hierarchy of priority. Put that at the
Yeah.
bottom. Start with the health.
But
I
but
agree.
I know another thing you've expressed to me though is when I am being more disciplined around nutrition and around fitness, that you feel then supported in your goals.
Yeah,
And when I'm slipping, you get kind of
I
frustrated
get
because
scared.
you don't feel supported. Because then it
Yeah.
feels like, well, you don't really care. And it makes it
Mm.
harder for me to care, So that comes down to with couples, like,
Yeah.
do we have shared values around fitness? Do we have shared values around nutrition? And that can be a one of the big disruptors I've also seen is where there's a couple who doesn't really nutrition and fitness are not important to them,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden one of them like the light goes off and for whatever reason they're like, oh my god, I want to like feel good in my body, and I want to be strong, and I want to look in the mirror and feel more proud of myself, and they get on like a fitness journey and their partner's not there.
Mm.
And sometimes their partner even feels like sort of like judged by it, and almost like back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, sort of digs their heels into their unhealthy lifestyle because they feel like almost like just their partner not being okay with the way they were, then it's a judgment on them. And that I've seen cause like major difficulties.
Mm.
That's a theme that comes up a lot, and not just with couples, but just all relationships. I've noticed, right, where
Yeah.
you've got a circle of friends, you all go out to you go out on the weekends, you drink a lot, you go to the game, you party all the time, you eat, maybe even smoke, whatever, and then all of a sudden the light goes on for one person, and the rest are like trying to pull you back in, potentially
Yeah.
unconsciously due to this insecurity. So as
Yeah.
as far as your friend circle, it may not be as big of a, I'll say, deal day to day versus the person you're married to or living with. So what do we do about that? What does someone do about that on both sides? So the person who sees their spouse doing this, which I suspect somebody could be listening to this podcast, curious about health, haven't really gone on that journey, and maybe they got into it because of their spouse and they're not sure, and then vice versa.
So to me, because what I'm thinking about this dynamic, it feels like codependence versus individuation in a relationship. And I recognize with EJ and I, like when we both fall off, like we're like, oh, I'm signing up for this fall off and I'm signing up for this fall off too. Let's totally go crazy. And then in January 2025, we are going to get really fit. So that's a codependent piece that actually doesn't feel really good because now I've lost my own sense of identity within it. And so when we are talking about this dynamic, I'm like, how do we create a healthy interdependent system where if one has a higher motivation than the other, we don't personally react to it, but we're a cheerleader for it. And if there are insecurities coming up for me, like, oh my gosh, I see like EJ's like eating potato chips and drinking whiskey every night. And I'm like, I've been to the gym 3 times. Like, hey, just checking in with each other emotionally around what is it like for you to be in this place right now? And what's it like for me? And how do you make it not about judging each other, right? Because it could be that EJ is maybe going through a difficult transition and like he's kind of just zoning out for a little bit. Like that's okay. But if I didn't know that and I didn't talk to him about it, I'm going to be like, oh gosh, this is my life. In 10 years, he's going to like, be that couch potato that I don't want. I mean, again, it could go down many different ways. But if you're
Mhm.
talking about why it's happening, you have your sense of independence still, but also for the sake of the relationship, and you're really trying to avoid that enmeshment piece. And just
Okay.
because
Yeah.
EJ's not working out and I am, or I'm not working out and he has, like, what is my insecurity around that? That's growth for me. Like, why am I so triggered by that? That must be something. Then that's my own guilt. Like, oh, I have a hard time being consistent in my life. Why is that? Oh, because I'm a human. Okay. I'm going to have a little self compassion here, but you got to look at those triggers. Why does it bother me if someone else is being healthy and I'm not?
I mean, the big thing for me is just you can't shy away from the difficult conversations. And that's a big,
Yeah.
concept that we talk about constantly on our podcast is just like,
Mm.
if the actually taking on the difficult conversations builds connection. Because one, when you take on difficult conversations consistently, you get better at them, you know? And that's our goal is like we have certain, points of pain in our relationship
Mm.
around like co-parenting, around blended family, where we've been dealing with it for over a decade.
Mm.
But because we've consistently talked about it, we've gotten better, And so when it comes around fitness and nutrition, it's just like you have to know that you're better off talking about it than not talking about it. And if Tara is feeling like a sense of discomfort with some of my habits and she knows like when I'm not taking care of myself, my belly gets bigger and then eventually I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. And she oftentimes can see something about me before I see it.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so it has to be okay in our relationship that Tara can be like, "Yo, look, you haven't been really taking care of yourself
Yeah.
that great, and I'm concerned for you because I know how you are. I know you care.
Yeah.
But what's going on? Because it's probably not just that I'm like, F it, I just want to I just want to put on 10 pounds. Like, boy, that sounds fun to me. It's that, yeah, like I'm struggling to be consistent
Stressed
or
out
I'm super stressed and I'm just not doing a good job of taking care of
or
myself.
talking
Like,
about it with your partner.
yeah. So
So the way Tara would bring that up is an I statement about her observations relative to what she knows and about each other. Like, I notice you've been stressed and not doing this thing that I know you value. How would that look?
I mean, if she comes into me with, hey, first of all, we always talk about like when, where, how. Like, if she comes to me at the right time and she does it in a time where there's not a bunch of kids and I'm not stressed and she does it, then she comes, the how is she says like, look, honey, I'm concerned about you, like, because I know, like, I've known you for years. I know how much you enjoy feeling good in your body, and I know how much you enjoy when you have a goal that you're working towards. That's going to be
It's like
so much
curiosity.
more hearable to me
Mhm.
than if she's like,
Why didn't you go to the gym
what
today?
is going on with you?
Yeah.
You are
Yeah.
not doing the things that I'm like, because what am I then? I'm like automatically defensive. I'm like, the fuck is your problem? Like, back off. Like, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
It's that soft curiosity. And we say we're each other's blind spots. Like so many times, like I don't really know what's happening for me. And EJ coming in to be curious and supportive feels so good
Mm.
because we've gotten really good at learning the skills to have that soft startup, right? The Gottmans call it soft startup versus harsh startup. Like, why are you eating that cookie? Versus like, hey, honey, help me understand what's happening for you right now. Right?
I
Because
love that. Yeah.
there's an emotional eating piece. So yeah.
Yeah. So a couple themes stick out. I mean, one is the individuation versus, I think you said, enmeshment or
Yeah.
codependence, right?
Yeah.
But then the other being curiosity. And it reminds me of something in positive psychology where there's a hierarchy of connection and the way that you respond to somebody. There's like 4 categories, right? And of course, there's ones that everybody would say, yeah, that's not great when you respond that way. But then there's one where there's a subtle difference. One being, hey, how are you? Or, just parroting back what they said versus what you said, Tara, which is asking a follow-up, asking, being curious, wondering about it, because then it kind of puts it back on the other, from the other person's perspective and not you accusing them, right? Not you pushing it on them.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, and I was going to say really quick, because under that, like my concern, my curiosity, it's like, I love this person and I want this person to be around forever. Like that's so flattering, but usually people think of it as like, oh, I'm not enough for you. Oh, I'm not good enough. And it's like, actually, if I U-turned it, it's because I love you so much. I just want you to be here with me until my grandpa lived to 110. So at least 110, babe. You got to surpass my papacy. but we don't share it out like that. It comes out so like critical. So yes, it's really, thank you.
I feel you. No, I know what you mean.
Hi, my name is Alan, and I just want to give a shout out to Philip Pape of Wits and Weights for being a huge part of the foundation for my continued health and well-being. Philip exemplifies a nutrition coach who demonstrates how much he cares. Philip works tirelessly and with dedication to provide coaching support and major content for us to use. He creates a practical approach from research, and Philip empowers all of us to use food as quality for our health. He is skilled in how to assess and direct nutrition. Philip creates a community full of wisdom, support, and camaraderie. In summary, Philip Pape is the real deal. He knows how to assess and direct nutrition, and he continues to steer me in the right direction. Thank you, Philip.
You mentioned kids before. I think there's a place to bring that in because, many people listening have children, and not to really talk about the parenting itself, but really for the relationship with the children involved in that relationship. Given everything we've talked about where there are differences, there is individuation, not everything's the same, and sometimes there's more extremes than others. How do you raise children in that environment where you're not pitted against each other? For example, an extreme would be one parent in a physique competition and one's not, or one parent thinks keto is the way to eat and the other one thinks it's like vegan. I know a couple whose one eats meat and one eats vegetables, and they make it work with their kids, and their kid eats both, which is it's a little bit odd, but it works. So how do you deal with that and make sure the kids are growing up in a healthy environment?
First of all, I love that because you're highlighting that every individual is unique, and whatever that uniqueness to them is a gift and a present. It's not the right way or the wrong way, right? That vegan is a gift for you. That's you, and you celebrate that. So those unique differences, to me, you celebrate that. And then how do you bring that together so it can combine into the family that feels good for all? Because now they're learning balance. They're learning respect of individual differences and uniqueness. And that's the thing too. Couples come in like, you guys are two unique individuals. You are not the same person. You're not supposed to be thinking the same thing. And if you think that, then what does that say about you? That like you're inferior, or like it's right. Having that conversation is like, oh yeah, you're right. We are different.
Yeah. I think you want to cultivate individuality, but also bring a focus to common denominators, right? Like in that couple you're talking about where one's a vegan or one's vegetarian and one's, a real meat-based diet. It sounds like right there, like, although it might look like they're diametrically opposed, the common denominator is they care about what's going into their body. They're making intentional choices. They're just different intentional choices.
That's a good reframe, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's what I want to focus with if that was causing that couple problems, is I want to focus on like, wow, like what a wonderful thing that you both care, So how do you support each other in the thing that is common? Because wouldn't it suck if you were with somebody who didn't care whatsoever? So I'm looking for things value-based mostly, because also like one thing that I know is like when our actions and our values don't line up, we tend to suffer more, right? So then it makes sense then that you want to support your partner in living in their value system, because then there's a higher likelihood they're going to feel good. They're going to feel good about how they move through the world.
So let's pull on that, the values. What if a couple came together, they got married, and they realize, before long, they have two very different values in very important areas: religion, politics, even dietary preferences, whatever. I mean, can that work? We've seen, like, what is that? James Carville and what are the two that were married, right?
Yeah. I remember. I know you're talking
I don't know
about.
if they are still together, but yeah.
I mean, it's difficult. And this is where, right, we, from the start of the consultation where we see a couple, like, we have to make sure they have one shared vision or goal for each other, but there's solvable and not solvable problems. Like, if you want kids or you don't want kids, like, you can't problem solve and expect that that's going to shift. And so there's just this level of reality that we get couples into. Like, if there's not even that, like a goal that you can say, like, we can't see you like that, like, no work could be done here. But I mean, for us, people coming in, right, it's like, it's either this or we're done. There is so many shared values that they just forgot. But if there are those non-solvables, like, we've had couples, like, right, where maybe they got together. Oh, I'm thinking of this one. They got together, they both didn't want children, and then there was this really horrible accident that happened where one almost passed away, and she realized, like, oh, I really want children now. And he's like, no, like, how did this change? Like, well, yeah, a near death accident. Like, and unfortunately, like, they ended up separating because right, she has a family now and children and remarried, but like, it wouldn't change. And she was just hoping, well, he'll just see one day, like, that kids are important, or I'll just get pregnant and then we'll just, like, get trapped in this. And it's like, no. Right. So they came and they did, like, a amicable separation within the couple's field, because there was no changing each other's mind, and we couldn't help of the experience that happened there. But things change, and you just have to have very adult, realistic conversations, because if there's not shared values, it's not happening.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I know that's very direct.
No. Some of this is going to be a little on the darker, sadder side, because that's reality.
Yeah.
And it happens. It's funny. I have a client who her big win was finally finishing her separation with her ex, and it allowed her to focus on herself like never before. And for her, that's a
Yeah.
positive. So I mean, sometimes that happens.
Absolutely.
But we're not here to talk about breaking people up. I just wanted to understand, where the lines are. And I guess the other thing is, physically, right? We have impacts on our bodies and our energy levels and stuff when we're going through some of this, when we're training or dieting or whatever. When that changes, how do you help couples maintain that intimacy, physical, emotional, whatever, when, like, the energy is tanking? That's another thing that comes to mind.
I mean, I think I would put it in the context of a relationship being longitudinal, like,
Mhm.
right? That this is going to be, you're going to be with your partner for years, decades, right? And, especially when it comes to, I think what you're talking about around, like, a period of time, a
Mhm.
training period of time, is being able to keep it into perspective and be like, okay, like, my partner needs this support, or I need to be patient for this amount of time, but it's going to pass, and
Yeah.
that's like a big thing we talk to couples about, because there is, like, sort of, for some, an implied agreement, but for some it's explicit. It's like in the vows they take, in the good times, the bad, right? And that, like, there are going to be times where your partners might go through a really difficult period of time.
There will be. Yeah.
And that could be a month, it could be a year, it could be a couple years, right? And what is your vow? What is the promise that you've made to your partner? And so if your partner goes through, like, they go through, like an injury, or
Mm.
a really big health crisis, right? Like, is there a limit? Like, oh, they can only be sick for 3 months and then I'm out, So I would bring it sort of into that context of, like, okay, first of all, let's talk about it. Your partner, sort of needs your support in doing this. There is going to be this negative, maybe, effect that you're going to have to deal with. But is that okay? And can you trust that it will pass,
Yes.
that you guys will manage it, that you'll have open-hearted, kind conversations about it, and that eventually, you'll move through it together? Because
Yeah.
that's the partner I want. I want the partner that trusts I'll be there for her no
Mhm.
matter what she goes through, and that she'll be there for me no matter what I go through.
I love that you mentioned vows and longitudinal thinking here, because that's the essence of sustainability, right? Having the thought that things aren't always going to be exactly the same, and the energy levels change and our needs change from one to the other. And
Yeah.
like you said, if you get it, I mean, my wife stick with me, but I had several surgeries over the past few years where, I was like, needed a little more attention for a little bit after that. And she was just amazing. But yeah, we're going to go through those times. It's also another reason. So listen up, listeners. I just recently did a podcast episode about why you don't want to diet very often and you want to actually gain muscle and gain weight to allow you to live in that high energy state. So when it comes to relationships and being there for the other person, just remember the least you can have to diet, the better, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can just think of like, so both Tara and I have enjoyed running over the years. She did eventually. I caught the running bug like, a year or two after we got together. And I loved it. It was just like a really neat high I'd never experienced, and seeing how it affected my body was kind of cool. And so we had fallen off the train of running and we'd been just lifting for a while. And last year we were like, let's do the San Diego Marathon. Let's do that. Like, that'll be fun to train. And we attempted to train the way we trained years ago. And we both got injured. And we both got
literally within like 6 weeks. We did run the 5K.
We went from like, running 1 to 2 miles to running like 12, 13 in like a 4-week period, which our bodies are not equipped to do anymore. Like we have to have a much less steep hill. But we got injured and we both struggled. We both struggled with that. We both sort of like,
we're not 20
it
anymore.
bummed us out. We could have still trained in certain ways and we just didn't. Our nutrition went offline. And so it sucked, but we sort of adapted our way through it. We made a compromise. We just ran the 5K instead. And now we're a year later looking at it and being like, okay, like maybe let's do that goal again.
But half.
But let's maybe just do the half, and let's really intentionally train this time instead of trying to train like somebody younger than who I am.
Let's be realistic of where our bodies are right now.
Yes.
That makes sense. All right. As we wrap up in time, I hope you guys have a little time for a couple rapid fire questions here.
Love it.
Go
Looking
for
for some short answers, whatever comes to mind. And maybe each of you can give an answer however you want to do it.
Short might be hard for Terry. You have to
it's fine.
Short answers. Short
don't have
answers.
time. All right. So the first one is, what's one thing everyone listening who's in a relationship should start doing tomorrow that they're not doing today?
Checking in every single day about how they're feeling and a shared like intention or goal for your relationship that day. It takes 5 minutes. I'm feeling this, this, and this. My intention is to like send you some cute text today. And then we end it with a positive relationship statement. Like, we can handle this shit together, whatever it might be. Right now it's the holidays. So like, we got this.
Nice.
It takes 5 minutes. You're on the same page. Okay, go.
I like that one. I'll just say yes on that.
Okay. All right. If you could wave a magic wand and make every couple understand one thing about balancing their fitness with their relationship, what would it be?
Let me take a pause there.
Ask that one more time.
Yeah, say it one more time.
Yeah, it's not a great rapid fire question. It's more of a deep question, I guess. If you could just wave a magic wand and every couple would just understand, like they would just know this about how to balance all this, of what would that one thing be? Yeah.
Things are going to change. Like the pattern of your life is going to change. Your physical body is going to change. That you have to be adaptable and know just because one thing is working doesn't mean that same thing is going to continue to work for a long time. Be adaptable.
And I can handle this and I can be flexible. Yeah.
Good. I love flexibility. We preach that all the time. So I love that. And the last one is, what's the most surprising thing you each have learned about each other this year?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I actually just learned it on our podcast we recorded this morning, that when I touch EJ's face with my 2 hands and give him a kiss, I'm the only person that's ever done it in his whole life. And it makes him feel very loved. Like, I'm going to do that more now. I had no clue.
And I can go directly at fitness with this, is that I didn't realize until she told me early on in the year that when I sense her frustration with me not being as tuned into my nutrition, it's not because she's judging me. It's because she just doesn't feel supported then in her nutritional goals. I
That's
always
very
felt
sweet.
judged.
Yeah.
It was that she just doesn't, she needs help. She needs help. And when I'm being steady, it's easier for her to be steady.
Awesome. I want the listeners to know that even an experienced relationship couple, licensed and everything, with a podcast is still always going to be learning about each other, right? That's
That's our whole gig right there.
This is why
Mallory.
people love us.
That's
We're
the
in
gig.
it. We're in it with you.
We're imperfect.
Exactly. All right, cool. Is there anything you wish I had asked that we didn't cover today in this realm that you're like, we really wanted to address that one thing? Anything you can think of?
I feel like this was so great that we
Cool.
touched on so many different avenues and aspects of relationship and wellness. So no, not for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think like if we were ever to go deeper, I think around like physical intimacy, I think that that's a big thing. And sort of like people, their changing bodies as they age, their fitness goals being in of alignment, out of alignment,
That's
like
true.
how that affects their sexual intimacy, I think is something that could be explored deeper.
That's a good one.
sometime.
That's a good one. Yeah,
It
you're right.
is.
That's like a whole other conversation. So I love it. All right.
Sure.
Well, we'll leave it at that. I do want listeners to know how to get a hold of you guys. If it's not obvious if you're watching the video, you can see the name of their podcast, of course, Relationship
Yeah.
Renovation Podcast. Where do you want folks to find you?
I mean, the easiest thing to do is just relationship renovation, type it into Google. You'll come to our website. We have in-office services. We have at-home programs. We're launching some coaching programs next year. Just relationship renovation will bring you right to us.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. This has been a pleasure. I hope the listeners got a lot from this. Again, we've never talked about this in this great detail, and yet it's one of the biggest roadblocks, challenges, but also opportunities to move forward when it comes to physical, mental health. So thank you so much, Tara and EJ, for coming on the show.
And we feel grateful to be your first.
Yes. I'm not a virgin anymore.
No, sir.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on.
You bet.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.